Well, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Thank you for downloading the Discovery Fellowship podcast of faith.
The Faith Life podcast at Discovery Fellowship Church.
Cow. Yes, the Faith Life podcast at Discovery Fellowship Church. I'm your host, Pastor Nathan, here with my co-host, Pastor Matt.
Hey, guys.
And that was a fun start.
I love it.
Sorry about that.
Hey, it starts off on a fun note.
You know, here's the problem. We are recording on a different day than normal. And because we're on a different day than normal, I think it just kind of throws everything off just slightly. And it's because I'm going to be gone next week. And so we wanted to make sure you, our dear listeners and viewers, did not miss an episode. So we're recording 2 episodes this week.
Yep.
Now, if you haven't done so, as always, please take a minute. Go ahead and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you have downloaded this. And leave us a review if you would like. Share this with a friend. And if you want to be a part of the conversation, just like some other listeners did, you can email podcast@dfchurch.com. Now, we're going to jump right into our In the News segment. Matt.
Yes.
There's a couple things that are in the news right now that are interesting to me. First of all, and I hadn't seen much about this at all until I started seeing some of these other headlines. Something apparently horrific is going on in Sudan right now. So I'm looking a little bit. It sounds like there's warring factions in the government. They overthrew the previous government, and now there's military factions that are just fighting.
Okay.
And one of the things that happened, they seized, there was a lab, and the World Health Organization says there's a high risk of biological hazard at this laboratory.
Oh, no.
Because of all this fighting, that this laboratory that had some type of biological hazard in this lab was not being properly contained because of loss of power and things like that. And so it was in Khartoum, which is kind of a fun name, and not far from the airport. So that doesn't sound like a good start to things. Like, obviously, things are bad right now. There's a lot of fighting and all those things happening. But a laboratory with biological, things in it, viruses or bacteria or something, who knows what, is now having some sort of a problem based off this. That seems like a recipe for another pandemic.
Yeah.
Now, I think if there was another pandemic this quick, that worldwide, globally, I think people would doubt it pretty immediately or think it was staged.
Yeah, for sure.
Just based off how we saw the reaction by the end of the last one.
Right. It kind of ties in a little bit to what we just talked about with our youth group. What we just recorded for next week's youth group, where we talked about lies that are easily believed.
Right. That's a good one.
Some that are too ridiculous, or you look at the opposite and it's truths that we don't want to believe.
Right.
Because it doesn't fit into my personal narrative type of thing. It's kind of interesting.
That's definitely interesting.
I did hear that they agreed to a 3-day ceasefire. So
I saw that, and other countries are all trying to evacuate.
Right, get everyone out of there.
Their own people out of the embassies and things like that. Now, it's interesting because I don't know a lot about Sudan.
Right.
When I think of it, I don't think of it as a place with biological research centers.
Yeah.
So apparently they have them.
Yep.
They have measles and cholera stored at this laboratory, it says. So a lot of I don't know, that sounds just kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And then the other big news I saw was on one day the firing of 2 media people from different ends of the spectrum, but both getting fired in one day. Of course, we're talking about Tucker Carlson and Don Lemon from CNN and Fox. Both of them getting fired, and both of them, it seems like not a lot of clarification on what happened.
Right.
And it seems like not a lot of advance notice. They didn't have, at least I know with the Tucker Carlson one I read,
2 weeks notice or whatever, right?
He did his last show. He didn't know anything, he didn't know at the time that was going to be his last show. And now he's just
That's crazy.
Gone.
Is it because they didn't fit the political narrative of that station?
It sounds like, at least from what I've read about Tucker Carlson's, Fox News just settled a huge lawsuit with Dominion voting machines.
Okay. Yep.
Dominion voting machines provided a lot of the machines in the last election.
Right.
And there was a lot of stuff being said on Fox about the reliability of those.
Right. Or lack thereof.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think Dominion sued them that would be libel if it's in print, slander if it's on video, I think, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I think they won.
Wow.
Like Fox had to pay like $700 million in damages or something crazy like that. And I know that during the proceedings for that lawsuit, a lot of Tucker Carlson's text and email came out of him criticizing a lot of Fox leadership. And so some people think that maybe that is why.
Right.
I don't know. But it's crazy because I don't know. I don't watch CNN. I don't watch I don't watch news. I don't have one specific place I go to news.
Right.
I go to everything and then I cross-reference and stuff like that. Yeah. Right. So I don't watch CNN. I don't watch Fox. But even when I've seen at least Tucker Carlson, I don't watch a lot of Don Lemon, but I know if Tucker Carlson's on, the right, Don Lemon is pretty far left.
Okay.
So it's interesting that they're both kind of like again, I don't know if Don Lemon is as popular. Tucker Carlson's a pretty popular guy.
Right. For both sides.
Right.
Because you either love him or you hate him, it seems like, right?
Yeah. Either way, you're watching his videos.
What's really interesting is there's been some quotes from some other Fox reporters who are really excited that Tucker's out.
Really?
So one says, and they're all speaking anonymously, of course.
Of course.
Pure joy. No one is untouchable. It's a great day for America and the real journalists who work hard every day to deliver the news at Fox.
Wow.
And then another one, a producer. It was a good move to part ways with Tucker. He knowingly spread lies throughout his time at Fox, but I fear management will replace him with someone who's just like him, so there probably won't be any real change.
Interesting.
Yeah. But apparently, there's several more quotes. Apparently, this is a morale boost for those who are still at Fox. That's weird.
That's weird. I thought most of the people there liked him.
I mean, I feel like he was kind of, what's the word, like a shock journalist?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Is there a better word than just shock journalist? But no, he was like big and incendiary. Like he would attract a lot of attention.
Yep.
And I'm sure he's got no shortage of options at this point. Yep. And I'm sure he had a contract that they had to break. And so I'm sure he got a big payday.
He's getting a big payday and he'll be just fine.
Yeah, so it's kind of a win-win for him. Like, he might be a little annoyed that it happened, but at the same time, I wonder if he's kind of happy.
Yeah. Crazy.
Well, let's move on to our main topic now.
Yes.
We're going to go to part 3 of this series. So we've done 2 parts so far about contradictions in the Bible. Yeah. And for those of you who have missed it, go back, check out our last 2 episodes to see where we are. But what we're doing is we're looking at a list from which website again, Matt?
This is atheist.org. So it's the American Atheist website. And this is an article there of reasons why we shouldn't believe the Bible because of these contradictions.
All right. So from these 15 contradictions, the American Atheist Organization has said, don't trust the Bible. Now, if you've been listening so far, some of these have been interesting.
Yeah.
Some of these have left a lot to be desired. Like, even trying to be generous, it's hard to see what they're trying to say.
All right, let's be honest. They're just bad, some of them.
They are really bad.
They're bad.
I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt.
It's a stretch to see a contradiction in it. Like, of all the things that you could pull out of, this is why I don't trust the Bible. Like, some of these, this article is putting out there is like, you're not giving yourself a great name. But that's okay.
That's okay.
We'll finish strong.
Okay.
Or maybe they'll finish strong. Who knows?
We've done 5 each week.
Yep.
And there's a total of 15.
Yeah.
So we're going to do 5 more this week to end it out.
Yep. You ready?
All right, let's hit it. I'm so excited.
The first one is about punishing crime.
Okay. Crime and punishment.
Crime and punishment. So in Ezekiel 18:20, the son shall not bear the iniquity of the father.
Okay.
Exodus 20, verse 5, I, the Lord, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the 3rd and 4th generations.
Okay. Now, again, this one's a little more interesting because on the very surface, it sounds contradictory.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
At least in this one, we've got 2 sentences where, devoid of any context, one of them says, don't punish the child for the father's sins.
Yep.
And then the other sin, God's going to punish the child for the father's sins.
Yeah.
All right. So what was the Ezekiel one again? Let's pull up its
dig
context.
into it. So Ezekiel 18:20.
Now, some of you might be asking, why don't I have this pulled up already? Well, we're actually live react. We didn't read these in advance. Not out of a lack of preparation, but more of a let's just try to blind react.
As if we're having a conversation with somebody at a coffee shop and they're saying, well, what about this? So let's talk about it a little bit. Now, the key thing, and we say this every single week about this, context matters. And so I could take anything I want to believe and I could probably find some words in the Bible to make that happen, to affirm it. But again, when you take it out of context, you're doing a disservice to your own intelligence, really. And so we want to look at the context. So in Ezekiel chapter 18, what's going on here? What do we see?
Yeah, so I'm pulling this up. And so right now, now, the word of the Lord came to me, presumably Ezekiel, right? It says, what do you people mean by using this proverb about the land of Israel, saying, and then he's got this thing, the fathers eat sour grapes, but it is the children's teeth that have become blunt. Okay. It's kind of a fun little saying. As I live, declares the Lord, you are certainly not going to use this proverb in Israel anymore. Behold, all souls are mine. The soul of the Father as well as the soul of the Son is mine. The soul who sins will die. And now he's going to go in. A man is righteous and practices justice and righteousness if he does not eat at the mountain shrines or raise his eyes to idols. He starts talking about all these different ways of righteous living.
Okay.
And then he ends that. If he walks in my statutes and keeps my ordinances so as to deal faithfully, he is righteous and will certainly live, declares the Lord. However, he may father a violent son who sheds blood and does any one of those things to a brother. Though he himself did not do any of those things. That is, he even eats at the mountain shrines and defiles his neighbor's wife, oppresses the poor. So he's saying, all right, there's a guy who lives righteously.
Yeah.
Then he could have a son who doesn't.
Yeah.
A son who's violent, who disobeys everything his father said. And he says, this son does all these terrible things. Will he live? He will not live. He has committed all these abominations. Yeah. He shall certainly be put to death. His blood will be on himself. Now, behold, he has fathered a son who saw all of his father's sins. All right, so we're just going generationally, right?
Right. Yeah.
Righteous guy fathers an unrighteous son.
Yeah.
Unrighteous son fathers another kid. He sees all the father's sins he has committed. He has seen to them and does not do likewise. He does not eat at the mountain shrine. So again, we've got a guy who's righteous.
And then in verse 17 says he will not die for his father's sins. He'll live.
Right.
Father dies for his own sins.
And then 19 says, yet you say, why should the son not suffer the punishment for the father's guilt? When the son has practiced justice and righteousness and has kept all my statutes and done them, he shall certainly live. The person who sins will die.
Yeah.
A son will not suffer the punishment of the father's guilt, nor will a father suffer the punishment of the son's guilt. The righteousness of the righteous will be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wicked will be upon himself.
So this is a guilt issue, a condemnation issue for sin. Okay, so we have some context.
So there's a context. Yeah,
Yep.
we've got God saying people will be dealt with by what they've done.
Okay.
Right? So the guy lives unrighteously, he is going to be judged. The guy lives righteously, he will be judged. You're not going to be judged for somebody else's actions.
Okay, so let's go to Exodus chapter 20, verse 5.
Okay. Now, off the bat, first of all, starting off, we are saying we're in a very different time, right? We're a lot earlier. Exodus is a law book, whereas Ezekiel is a prophecy from God, right? So Ezekiel receives this message from God and records it. Exodus, we're getting the legal system for the country of Israel. Okay. Exodus, what did you say? 20 verse 5?
Verse 5. And so we're in the 10 Commandments. Exodus 20 is the 10 Commandments.
We are.
So that's important. What is the context of this verse? What commandment are we talking about? This is the one about the idols, right? You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or earth beneath or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments.
Interesting.
That is very interesting.
So we've got a similar thing here about worshiping idols, and we have both sides of it. So he says the punishment of the fathers to the third and the fourth, but those who keep his commandments get blessings for thousands
of years.
Right. And so you've got an interesting weighted version of this where it's like, yes, there is this language of guilt being shown to the guilty's family.
Okay.
and blessing, though, being shown to the righteous family. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, the word consequence is used here.
Okay.
And so
the consequences used in which one? Exodus?
Sorry. I see consequence here, right?
Right.
Like the punishment, that's a consequence for a sin.
Right.
Right. It's not like a guilt thing. Because guilt is the word that's used in Ezekiel.
Right.
All right. Well, why is the guilt on them? It's not.
Right.
But now it says the punishment is there. So is it related to, we see the consequence of like this generational type of sin happening?
Right.
Right. So if I have AIDS and I have a kid,
right,
I'm potentially going to pass that on.
There's a consequence
for my actions that caused this in my life.
Right.
Or like if I am a severe alcoholic and I get drunk and I abuse my kids.
Right.
And oftentimes we see that alcoholism generationally.
Right.
Right. Like if it's common in my family,
right,
I have like a tendency towards that. Is that maybe some of like this passing to the generations?
Yeah, that's how I would read this. And so it's like, or as another example, you rob a bank, you go to jail, your kid now is raised up without a dad.
Yeah.
And that causes strife and that causes problems. It's not you are guilty and receiving a punishment.
Right. You're not going to jail also for the thing that your dad did.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And that's what I see here. So that there are consequences to our actions that affect the world.
Right.
And now the atheist advocate side of it says, well, both of them say, you're worshiping idols, and God says he's inflicting the punishment of the fathers on the children. So is that more than just a passive consequences and an active move by God in one?
Right.
But again, I think you're right that so much of this is about guilt versus consequences. Yeah. I really do see that throughout this whole section. But what does that make sense to you if you're watching and listening? Like, do you think that's adequate?
Right. I might suffer the consequences of previous generations' sins, but until I act upon that myself, I'm not held individually accountable for their sins. I might be suffering because of it, but I'm not accountable to it. I think that's where we're seeing these two verses not contradict each other, as they're talking about separate things. They do feel similar.
They do. And again, it's one of those, the text and the wording on the surface does seem pretty. You know what might be interesting? Matt, can you pull up an interlinear? Yep. Like, what does it say in Hebrew? Because again, one of the things we talked about is not only context, but that we're looking at these cultures and these languages that are so far removed from our own.
Right.
So I'd be curious to see in each one which time this happens. Like, what's the words here? What is it in Hebrew? This idea of punishment versus guilt and things like that.
Yeah. So.
While we look up the Bible
quick,
in the interlinear translation, I also think an interesting verse that we could go to when we're looking at this is Deuteronomy. So a third verse to pull into this is Deuteronomy 24:16, which says, "The fathers shall not be put to death for the children, neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin." So these two might even be your example of a closer, contextually speaking, because we got Deuteronomy and Exodus. This is all the law versus a prophet.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things that jumped out to me as I was reading that one as well, one of these is talking about God's actions, and one of these is talking about our actions. And what I mean by that is you cannot go out and convict like I did with the crime example. You're not, even Deuteronomy and Ezekiel, you are not convicting a person based off what somebody else in their family did. They are not going to be legally accountable. They're not going to be guilty of somebody else's sin. However, God, being God and not us, and able to act in a way that we cannot act, is able to appropriately punish even outside of individual family. That's my first thought. Again, live reacting to these so we can see what we think. Yeah. But
so the word in Exodus is pakad, which the word that we're translating, or in the NIV at least, it says punishing the children for the sin of the parents of the third and fourth generation. So that's the word that I looked up, was that one that is translated punishing.
Yeah.
And it means to attend to visit, to muster, and to appoint. Potentially to call to account. So that's pretty interesting. Let me get you the word from Ezekiel real quick. So that would be this word, which is nasa, which is to carry. So in Ezekiel, it says the son shall not carry on the iniquity of the father. In Exodus, it's, let's see, the translation that the American Atheist uses says visiting the iniquity of the fathers. And so that one would be to appoint to them, potentially.
Right.
Which is kind of interesting.
The other thing that we don't have in the Deuteronomy, or the Exodus passage, I'm sorry, we don't have any statements about the way that these people are living. And what I mean by that is, in the Ezekiel one, we're seeing, hey, this guy was evil, but his son was good, but his kid was evil. And, we've got the individuals, and God is saying they're going to be judged accordingly. In Deuteronomy, we don't know. So let's say there's this Deuteronomy thing. The punishment will go to multiple generations. But if those generations repent, if those second generations live righteously, if they move towards God,
right,
does that stop it? Right? Is this, again, consequences? I think there's two. Yeah. The more we've looked at this and the more I've kind of thought through it, you're watching us in real time try to, think about these issues, which, like you said, Matt, if you were in a situation with an actual atheist discussing this, they brought that up, you're going to you might have to think through this, and we might have to process it. But I do think it is consequences, and I do think versus guilt. And I do think, especially seeing that Deuteronomy passage where we see God saying, you will not punish people for other people's sins, right? Our response to people's sin needs to be just and within the bounds of what they did, not key. What other people did. Whereas God can look at the bigger picture and act justly from a bigger point of view, as well as allow consequences to occur.
That's good.
So
I think this maybe is one of their better ones.
This is one of their better ones. So I like it.
See, they're finishing strong. Way to go,
guys. Guys.
All right, so the next one is temptation.
Okay.
This one's good. So James 1:13, let no man say when he's tempted, I'm tempted by God, because God cannot be tempted with evil, neither does he tempt anyone. Then Genesis 22 says, it came to pass after these things that God tempted Abraham.
What?
Yeah.
God tempted Abraham in Genesis what?
Genesis 22, right at the beginning.
Okay.
Sometime later, now this is NIV. They're using King James Version, which
I've got NASB pulled up, but
maybe hot take.
Don't use King James?
Yeah, because there are a lot of translation errors, like significant errors.
King James is an older translation. It was done at a time where we didn't have a lot of manuscripts. And we don't have a lot of the transparency of the process. We know that King James himself had some input on it.
Yep.
And so while it is a good historical artifact, it is not your most accurate.
Right.
Because since the time of that translation, we've discovered thousands and thousands and thousands more manuscripts from that time period that we've been able to now compare and compile.
Which I wonder if this translation was intentionally chosen by the atheists, whoever wrote this article for their website, because that has a lot of translation errors that might lead one to think that there's these contradictions that happen. Anyway, Genesis chapter 22, verse 1, NIV. Sometime later, God tested Abraham.
God tested
Abraham? It uses the word tested in this translation. NASB also says tested.
Okay.
So a lot of our more accurate translations, I think ESV is another really good one that we can look at as well. So I'll do that real quick just to make sure that we're being faithful here.
Yeah.
Tested.
Okay. What's the Hebrew word here? Well, let's pull it up. I've got that right now. Nisa. Yeah. It has, here's the other thing, 2 occurrences in the Old Testament.
Okay.
So we don't have a lot of occurrence of this word, because a lot of times you can't look at just the definition of a word. You got to look at how it's used, right? Context matters, idioms matter, pieces of language matter. And so one of the best ways to see this specific word is to look at how it's used in other places. Now, various cognates of it look like they are used 36 times throughout the Bible. So we see Genesis 22:1 that God tested Abraham. King James says tempt, you're right. 1 Samuel 17:39, for he had not tested or had not proved. So let's look at the to test or to try is the Hebrew word here.
Okay.
To test or to try or to prove.
I don't think any of that is
to make a test, to put to the test. Now you do see occasionally 3 instances, it looks like it's used in a more temptation type way. But the problem is, what do we mean when we say temptation?
Right.
And that's a shorthand, because you could be, we're going to go, because it's Star Wars in our brains right now.
Okay.
In episode 7, I know it's everyone's favorite Star Wars movie. I liked it. But in episode 7, you have an interesting thing. You have Kylo Ren, who is fully invested in the dark side. And he says he's tempted by goodness. Okay. He's tempted by the light. Right? So temptation
doesn't always mean bad thing.
Just means you are drawn to do something, generally in the sense. Now, we use it shorthand in the negative connotation all the time. God, in James, God will not tempt us to sin.
Right.
Right? Like, do you have the James verse pulled up again? Like, what is the actual, what is it? What is the full verse there?
So it's James chapter 1. Verse 13.
James 1:13.
And it says, sorry, I'm in the Greek right now.
All right, I'm looking at it.
So it is in a slightly different order.
13, here's NASB. No one can say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself does not tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. And then when that lust is conceived, it gives birth to sin. And when sin has run its course brings forth death.
So the context here is tempted to do evil.
Right. Tempted towards sin.
God will never tempt you towards sin, evil, wickedness.
Right.
And the context of the situation we have with Abraham is he's being tested.
It's a test. It's not a temptation. It's a test.
Yeah.
So
of faithfulness, actually.
A test of
the rest of the context of that is the whole, are you willing to sacrifice your only son for me?
Right.
And
which we talked about 2 weeks ago, I think.
He fulfills that test. He goes through it, and then he is stopped by God. God proves himself faithful to Abraham as well in the promises he gave him. So it's super interesting when we, again, look at the context.
Right.
It matters.
It matters. Right? So again, we're back to one where they just looked at King James, one word. And it wasn't a good one.
One word.
Man, I had high hopes from that last one that you guys were getting somewhere, but alas and alack.
Family relationships. Exodus 20:12. Again, we're in the 10 Commandments. It says, honor your father and your mother.
Perfect. That's good.
That's good advice,
throughout
guys.
the whole Bible,
honor your father
actually.
and your mother. Now, you have Luke chapter 14, verse 26, right? Yep. And so, again, 10 Commandments, honor your father and mother. But then we get into Luke, New Testament. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, his wife and his children, his brothers and his sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple.
Oh, my goodness. Well, that just did it. We're done. I know I keep saying that a lot, but it's just funny because it's all right. We need to talk about a couple things. First of all, when hate is used in the Bible, what does it mean? Because we see this concept like Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated, and often contextually, hate often refers to putting it lesser than something else.
Okay.
Right? So if I have to choose one over the other, like in that instance, Jacob was chosen by God. Right. Jacob was loved. Esau hated means he wasn't chosen.
Right.
It doesn't always have the connotation we use.
Yeah. It can be it's used in other areas. So this word hate in Luke, in the Greek, is meseo, which is often used as to love less or to esteem less.
Right.
So in that context, it makes complete and perfect sense because I shouldn't put anything above God. In fact, in the context of Exodus 20, when we're talking about the 10 Commandments, it talks about don't put anything in the place that God goes.
Right. And so what Jesus is saying is if you have to make a choice between God and your family,
right,
it's a tough thing to do, but you pick God.
You pick God.
And even so, large crowds were following. This is the Luke 1 in context. If anyone comes to me, does not hate his own father, mother, wife, children, brothers, sisters, yet even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Yeah. Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which one of you, when he wants to build a tower, does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish. All who are watching will begin to ridicule him. So what he's saying is that if you want to follow him, count the cost. And sometimes that cost will be your family.
Right. Those people that say that you're just a Christian because you think that's the easy way out does not understand what it means to deny yourself, pick up your cross daily, and follow him.
Right.
This is not the easy life.
No.
But this is a hope-filled, joy-filled, purpose-driven life that we get to live. Not like the book, but like what God calls us to in nothing against the book. But like it's also tough. In fact, Jesus says that, hey, guess what? You're probably going to be hated because of me.
Right.
So it's not like we're doing this for the fame and fortune.
Right.
We're doing this because it's truth.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then I think there's probably also something to be said. Often Jesus uses hyperbole. Like when he talks about it's easier for a camel to go through an eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. Like this very charged over the top language to demonstrate what it looks like to choose God over anybody else. It means hating your family if you have to because of following God.
Right. That's good.
Okay. That was not bad. Pretty easy.
All right. So the next one is the resurrection of the dead. So in Job chapter 7, verse 9, he that goes down to the grave shall come up no more. And then in John 5, 20 and 29, now they only have a small little section of this quoted, probably misquoted. So I'm going to bring up the whole thing that they're saying. Do not be amazed at this, for a time is coming when all who are in their graves will hear his voice and come out. Those who've done what is good will rise to live. Those who have done what is evil will rise to be condemned.
All right, so we're starting in Job.
Yeah.
He that goes down in the grave shall come up no more.
Yep.
We talked a little bit about this before. We're in Job 7:9.
Yeah.
Who's talking in Job 7:9? That's the first question you want to ask. And I think, this is a good, again, like we said last week, this is a good demonstration on why it can be easy to just dismiss something because this does take time. This is not, understanding something is not an easy, quick thing.
Right.
If you're looking for just quick surface level answers, well, in anything in life, this isn't just a biblical thing, a Christian thing. It takes time. You've got to look at it, understand the context, understand the data. It's like on a tangent. I see this all the time. Like people see the headline of a medical study and immediately like, oh, see, it says this. Well, no, did you read the study? Did you look at what it was actually saying? Because oftentimes people will write a sensational piece and pull a chunk out of context.
I read one sentence.
Right. Without actually giving it all of.
So Job is talking here.
Okay, this is Job.
Job the man.
Yep. Job the man.
Human, right?
Yeah.
Is talking to God, crying out to God, really.
Yeah.
And he says, as the cloud vanishes and is gone, so is one who goes down to the grave. He does not return.
Sheol does not come back up. Right. And we're seeing, again, Job talking in the general sense that we see in life. When you die, you're dead.
Yeah.
You're not back.
Yeah.
Okay.
So who's talking in John then when we get to John chapter 5?
John chapter 5, we have, which verse was it in John 5?
28 and 29.
Yeah, we have Jesus talking.
It's Jesus.
Right? And he says, all right, truly, truly, I say to you, this is 25. A time is coming, even now has arrived, when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. For just as the Father has life in himself, so he gave to the Son also to have life in himself. And he gave him authority to execute judgment, because he is the Son of Man. Do not be amazed at this, for a time is coming when all who are in the tombs will hear his voice and will come out. Those who did good deeds to a resurrection of life, those who committed the bad deeds to a resurrection of judgment. So Jesus is talking about the generalized sense that at the end of all things, God will bring everybody back. Is that there is a resurrection coming to earth. That is not the normal way of things. When you die normally, you stay dead. But God is going to do something amazing and different.
Right.
That's not a contradiction.
No.
That's not even close to a contradiction. That's Job saying poetically what the normal human experience is. And God saying, but I'm going to do something amazing.
Right.
Okay.
All right, let's keep going then.
Okay.
Because
there's only one more.
Yeah. What Jesus was saying ties into this last one because he's kind of talking about the end.
Okay.
And so their last big contradiction is here at the end of the world. Matthew 16. And they have a bunch of verses here. So I'm going to read them all. I'm going to read them in the King James that they have them written in, and then we can look into them a little bit more. Matthew 16:28. Verily I say unto you, there be some standing here which shall not taste of death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Luke 21. Okay. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass away till all be fulfilled. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away.
Okay.
Romans 13. And that, knowing the time, that now it is high time to awake out of sleep, for now is our salvation nearer than when we believed. The night is far spent, the day is at hand. Let us therefore cast off the works of darkness, and let us put on the armor of light. James 5:8. Be ye also patient, establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. Oh, I know where they're going with this. Okay.
I see, yeah.
1 John 2:18. Little children, it is the last time. And as ye have heard that the Antichrist shall come, even now there are many Antichrists, whereby we know that it is the last time, like end of time.
Right.
1 Peter 4:7, but the end of all things is at hand. Be sober, watch yourselves unto prayer. Okay. So then they have they give them some commentary.
Yep.
These words were written between 1800 and 1900 years ago, were meant to warn and prepare the first Christians for the immediate end of the world.
That sounds like a interpretation right there, but okay.
It does sound like an interpretation. Some words are those supposedly straight out of the mouth of the Son of God, in quotes. The world did not end 1800 or 1900 years ago. All that generation passed away without any of the things foretold coming to pass. No amount of prayer brought it about, nor even so much patience and belief and sober living. The world went on as usual, indifferent to the spoutings of yet another batch of doomsday prophets with visions of messiahs dancing in their deluded brains. The world, by surviving,
oh my goodness,
makes all those passages contradictions.
Okay, so let's just take a look at these one at a time. We'll try to go kind of quick, but there's a lot of verses here, and we might have some things to say. So the first one, Matthew 16:28. If you're following along at home, I say unto you, there be some standing here. Again, they go King James.
Yeah.
Which shall not taste of death.
Do you want me to read it from ESV?
Please do.
Truly I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom.
Okay, so what is Jesus talking about?
Right. So is
this even about the end of the world?
Seems like Jesus might be talking about the transfiguration.
Correct. That's what I was going to say. I think contextually speaking, Jesus coming into his kingdom, we see pretty shortly after this, right? The transfiguration happens.
Right.
And the transfiguration is often considered like Jesus says the kingdom of God is here.
Right.
Often. Jesus viewed and taught that his first coming was the establishment of God's kingdom on earth, starting with Jesus. Now, we tend to think of his final, ultimate establishment at the end of all things.
Right.
That's not when it starts. Jesus, Paul says Jesus was lifted on high and he reigns with God now. Jesus' kingdom started at the first coming of Jesus. So people who saw the transfiguration, which happens again pretty quick after this first verse, witnessed the Son of Man coming into his kingdom.
They were there. They saw it.
Correct. The other thing that you could be saying, because again, Son of Man, well, what does Son of Man mean?
Right.
It's an allusion to the book of Daniel.
Okay.
And what happens in Daniel? Daniel says, I saw one who was like a son of man coming on the clouds.
Yeah.
What's interesting in Daniel is that the direction the Son of Man is going is not coming to earth. In fact, the Son of Man in Daniel is raised to heaven to be seated at the right hand of God.
So like the transfiguration of Jesus that happened.
Transfiguration, and then even more fully, the ascension of Jesus after the resurrection.
Yep, which you can read in Acts.
So I think that isn't even talking about the end of the world. And I think some of these are going to come from some confusion about what the end of the world looks like. So let's go into the other one.
All right, Luke 21.
Luke 21, 32 to 33.
Yeah, so
this is a good one too.
I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away.
All right, so we've got two things happening first. Heaven and earth will pass away, but his word shall not pass away. Now, this generation shall not pass away till all these things have happened. Well, then the first question should be what things?
What is this generation?
And what is this generation?
And,
so what are the things he's talking about?
Well, we would need the context, so we have to go to the rest of
What's
Luke,
the rest
right?
of Luke?
So let's
look at Luke 21, and I'm assuming this is going to be comparable to like Matthew 24. Right? It's a parallel section.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're in Luke chapter 21. And then, it's the destruction of the temple. It's some signs of the end time. And so, if
we don't have time to read the entire
we won't
thing.
get into all of it, but this is also where people are going to hate you because of me. A couple verses back. When you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, you'll know that its desolation is near. Let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. City, get out.
Now, a lot of people have taken, even Christians have taken this in Matthew 24 to be explicitly about the end of everything.
Right.
However, contextually, at the very least, it seems to be about the destruction of Jerusalem, which happened in AD 76, which this generation
was still there
when Jerusalem was destroyed. Now, if we want to try to get into a little bit more of an eschatological sense of this, we can talk about, are those about just the destruction of Jerusalem? Or are these passages about the final end of the world?
Even if these passages are about the final end of the world, the Greek word for this generation that's used and its Hebrew equivalent, which we can read in Psalm 12, often means such a people.
Right.
This type of people. Right. So not this specific group, but a type.
Right. So that's one possible answer. The other thing that interpretively can fit would be the generation who is there witnessing these events. It will the beginning and end of these events will happen in their lifetime.
Right.
So that it's not a long drawn out thing, but the generation who is witnessing this will see it to the end. Now, all of those are viable interpretive options.
Yeah.
And none of those then become contradictory.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so then Romans 13, 11 to 12.
Romans 13.
Here's the other thing that we need to know. Throughout all of the letters, they all refer to the time since the ascension of Christ to heaven as the end of time. So any time since then is considered the end, the last days, the final time of human history. And this kind of goes into like, if in the big picture, you've got, all these things with, Adam and Eve and Noah, Abraham, Moses, all these people are all these different periods of history. And now we are in this final one because Jesus was the final word, right? Jesus was the final prophet. Jesus was the last one to come to show us who God is.
Yeah.
And at this point, we are just waiting for the second coming.
Right. Well, and I love this because Romans 13:11 says our salvation's nearer than when we first believed.
Right. Which is always true.
Duh. Like, how is that?
That shouldn't be controversial.
No, it makes really good sense. And it's not saying that it's tomorrow that everything is finally fulfilled.
Right.
It's just saying we're one day closer today than we were yesterday.
Right.
I feel like that's like,
so yeah, I don't even think we need to spend more time on Romans 13 because that's just saying, hey, make use of the time you have because you don't know when the end will be.
Which is great advice.
Great advice.
For all people, all times.
I think James 5:8 is going to be the same one.
You also be patient, establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand.
Right. We know Jesus is coming back soon. Be ready for it. Be patient. Establish your hearts. Be ready. Yeah. That's not saying tomorrow.
No.
But it could be. Right? That's the whole point is we don't know when it is.
Yeah, we can't control that timing.
Right.
And so we are prepared for it immediately.
Right.
That makes sense.
Now, this is a good one because I think they've bought into some cultural assumptions on the next one versus what the Bible actually says.
Okay.
So 1 John 2:18.
Okay, I'll read it in ESV real quick. Children, it is the last hour, and as you've heard that Antichrist is coming, so now many Antichrists have come. Therefore, we know it's the last hour.
All right. So what I'm wondering, when they see the word Antichrist, they take the popular conception that says the Antichrist being this big, scary end times figure.
Right. They're taking what we see in Revelation, potentially.
Potentially. But here's what's funny. John, right here, this is the only time that the term Antichrist is used.
Yeah.
And John gives us, and the reason I know all this is I preached a whole sermon series through the book of 1 John. And he gives us what he means by Antichrist.
Right.
He's not talking about an eschatological figure when he says Antichrist. He's talking about somebody who denies the humanity and physical incarnation of Jesus.
Right. Which there are many of those people in our world today.
Correct. And there were at his time as well. And so he says, because of that, if I say, okay, that there are people called Antichrist. There are people who deny that Jesus came in the flesh. And because of that, we know that we are in this end time, the end of times.
Right.
Because you couldn't be in a time period denying Jesus had come in the flesh until after Jesus had come in the flesh.
Right.
That's all he's saying.
Yeah.
That's silly. Okay.
Again, bad interpretation.
Right. And then the last one is 1 Peter 4:7. The end of all things is at hand.
Yeah. It's
be therefore sober.
Yeah. Be self-controlled and sober-minded for the sake of your prayers. Right. Is what the ESV phrases it as.
Right. And so again, they're compressing it to say that because they're saying, hey, we're in the end, Jesus could come. Because this is true. The disciples, some of them probably did think Jesus would come back next week.
Absolutely.
And we still are living in that time where we believe that Jesus could return at any time.
Yeah. And Peter is writing here to Christians who are suffering for the sake of Jesus. And so this is like probably comforting and encouraging to them of like, hey, persevere through this. The end is at hand. You still got work to do though. So press on, right? Like it's not saying, hey, go ahead and stop because it's happening tomorrow. That's how near it is. Yeah. It's more of the encouragement of you can do it. Keep going because they're suffering for Jesus' sake at this point.
Right. So again, all right.
So good.
Website had maybe two ones that we actually had to think about. That we had to work through a little bit. We had to talk through.
Yeah.
That we had to do more than just read a couple extra sentences.
Right. Yeah. But that just reminds us, like, not just with the Bible, but with anything, when you hear something that might seem out there, take a moment to like investigate. Right? Like you were talking about with the news earlier, you cross-reference things because you're not just going to believe the first thing you hear. You want to make sure that this is reality and multiple sources are affirming it. Same is true with God's word. Right. If you hear someone saying, well, the Bible says this, look it up yourself, read some context and come to your own conclusions about, well, what does God's word actually say? And then what does it mean?
I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to be it for that section and for that topic. So again, if you have any thoughts on that, any things that you think were like, well, you didn't talk about this one, or I didn't like your answer for this one, like, you know, we're human.
Let us know.
We're not inerrant.
Right.
Sometimes we might say something dumb. I'm not going to lie.
Probably oftentimes.
But
just ask my wife.
And so with that, we're going to move into my favorite AI section.
Oh my goodness.
Woo! So we've asked ChatGPT, as always, to generate us a list of 10 things for you to react to, Matt.
I'm so excited.
So here's the prompt. Give me a list of 10 Christian pickup lines that might actually work.
Oh man, I've probably used every one of these on my wife.
So
like post marriage, I send her like the cheesy lines all the time.
All right, no, if you are dating and you want to try any of these pickup lines, please do, and then write to us, podcast@dfchurch.com. Let us know if it worked.
Yeah. So fun story real quick.
Yeah.
My tradition for Valentine's Day every year is all day long I will text my wife like cheesy pickup lines.
That's
all
hilarious.
day. They're terrible. She rolls her eyes to every single one of them.
Well, I've got some new ones for you.
See, I'm glad we're recording this because then I'm just gonna play it for her next Valentine's Day.
Play.
Yep.
Number 10. I'm not usually this forward, but I feel like the Holy Spirit is leading me to ask you out.
All right.
Would that work, do you think?
No, I don't think it would work. I mean, that's a soft entry. It's not like too bold. Yeah. Next, give me another.
This next one's fun.
All right.
I'd love to pray with you sometime, maybe over dinner.
Yes.
Right?
See, that's good.
That's one's
good.
Fun.
Yep.
I like that one a lot.
Because what Christian girl doesn't want
to pray?
Yeah. And especially to have like a guy be praying for him with her. And then boom, over dinner. Let's go.
So you made an assumption there. A woman could use these on a man, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, good.
Yep. I'm reacting to these from my perspective.
From your perspective.
I'm going to use these if they're good.
Number 8.
Yeah.
I'm not a theologian, but I think we were predestined to be together.
Ooh, little Calvinist action right there. I like
love
that.
Yeah, for you Calvinists out there, go ahead and use that one. That one's fun.
Yep.
Number 7. You must be a special kind of prayer because I feel blessed just being around you.
You must be a special kind of prayer?
Yeah, I don't know what that means.
Okay.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, this next one's not really a Christian one. I'm going to throw that out there.
Okay. Like, is it PG-13?
No. It's I don't understand what would be biblical about this.
Got it.
Can I follow you home? Because my parents always told me to follow my dreams.
Okay, first of all, that's a great line.
It's a great line.
But it does not fall into
it's not really
the Christian pickup lines.
No.
Though,
but it is a good one.
As a Christian, if you say the pickup line, does it then become a Christian's pickup line?
No, because there's no biblical, like nowhere in the Bible does it say, follow your dreams.
Okay.
Unless you're Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Right.
He could have said that one. This is kind of a rehash. I didn't believe in predestination until I saw you, and now I know I was meant to meet you tonight.
Yep. Again, a good one. Maybe use them like a few weeks apart. You don't want 2 predestination pickup lines back to back. I'm assuming that like you're using them on the same person. So
right. Well, no, if you're at like a speed dating event, you could use all these.
Well, then you just pick your favorite and use it on every like person that comes to your table.
Actually, again, if you are going to a speed dating event, try each of these and see which one works the best.
Oh my goodness.
That would be like some good
go to the speed dating
data.
event.
Okay. Number 4. I must be lost because heaven is a long way from here.
Ooh.
That's pretty smooth.
I like the do your feet hurt.
Because you fell from heaven?
Because you fell from heaven. And you've been running through my mind all day. MXPX uses both in one of their songs.
Nice.
Yeah.
Weird Al has a whole song of just terrible pickup lines. It's pretty funny.
Nice. I'll have to listen to it.
Number 3.
Okay.
I like this one. Is your name Faith? Because you are the substance of things I've been hoping for.
Oh, let's go.
Right?
Yeah.
That was great.
So a little Hebrews 11 action.
Oh my goodness.
Man, all right.
That one I like.
That's
that
good.
one, that's like my number 1 because I'm going to tell you these next 2 don't make as much sense to me. That one's great though. Yeah. I like that one a lot.
That's fire.
It's biblical. It's fun.
All right, I'm ready. Number 2.
I'm just trying to understand it. Excuse me, I think you dropped something. My jaw. Are we going like Samson? Jawbone of a
jawbone
donkey? I don't know.
So he's calling himself a
donkey? Yeah.
All right.
I don't understand what I don't get that one.
Okay, that probably goes into the follow your dreams one. Because like you drop my jaw is like the right.
All right.
Like,
we're gonna call an audible here.
Okay.
We're gonna ask, can you explain number 2? Can it explain why it's...
Oh, that'd be funny.
Certainly. Number 2. How is this Christian? All right. It says it's a play on the phrase "you drop something," which is often used as a pickup line.
It's not a play on the phrase. It literally says the phrase.
The twist is in this Christian pickup line is that instead of saying "you drop something," the speaker says, "I think you dropped something. My jaw." The implication is that the person is so attractive or impressive that it caused the speaker's jaw to drop in amazement. It's a lighthearted and humorous way of expressing interest in someone while also incorporating a Christian element. So then I said, how is this Christian? You're right. I apologize for the confusion. Number 2 doesn't have a clear Christian element, and I should have been more thoughtful in my response. I strive to provide accurate and relevant information, and I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. I'll make sure to be more thoughtful. Can you give me a replacement line?
That's pretty good.
I like how conversational this
right,
is.
And
sure.
like how apologetic, recognizing the mistake. Like, that's good advice for us as humans.
Yeah, okay.
This is the replacement?
Yeah.
Okay, number 2.
Do you have a map? Because I just got lost in your eyes and I need directions back to Proverbs 31.
Oh, snap.
Proverbs 31 being like the characteristics of a virtuous woman.
Right. So my guess is AI ran out of Christian pickup lines.
Yep.
Used a normal pickup line of, do you have a map? I got lost in your eyes. And then added a Bible verse that had to do with...
To find Proverbs, I need a map to Proverbs 31.
Yep.
Little silly. I don't like
what's
that one.
number 1?
Number 1, are you a miracle? Because I've been praying for someone like you to come into my life.
There it is.
That's not number 1.
Number 3 is still the best.
Number 3 is
far.
by far.
Yep.
Like that one actually had some creativity and interesting bit to it. I really... that's just funny.
That's really good.
Okay. Let's jump over to some listener mail real quick as we close out our episode today. A little bit longer one. Next week's will probably not be this long, but we'll see.
Next week we have something fun planned. So.
It is going to be fun. So we, if you'd like to write to us, you can email podcast@dfchurch.com, just like this guy did. He gave us some more contradictions.
Okay.
So we're not going to go through all of these right now, but one that was interesting. Who was the 12th apostle? We see in Revelation 21:14, the 12 names of the apostles are written on the foundation of heaven. So I think we can agree on 11 of them, but was it
what about
Judas, Matthias, Paul, as all of them were counted? Now, part of that is going to be an interesting thing because when we say like the 12 are often referred to, that name seems like more of a kind of like a colloquial nickname as opposed to necessarily having to be literal.
An exact number. Yeah.
And I think Revelation being a vision, I don't think we need to get too hung up on it being a literal 12 names written on the city that we see there. It's just more a representation of the esteem that the original disciples and apostles received. That would be my thought. But he gave us a couple other ones that were pretty fun as well. So maybe if we ever need a few more to react to, we've got those there.
Love it.
But that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next week.
Bye, guys.